So a quick little video on how the process I use to run the wires. So it starts with my wiring diagram. So here at the moment we're going to run the ground switch, the ground wire, for the battery switch group. So I can see here this runs from the bus tie switch. It's called bus switch common ground, and it runs to the Forester tabs. And on the Forester tabs page, I can see it is in the bottom row on the left-hand side, number 3. So the next step is to measure the wire. So to measure the wire, I use a little bit of PVC hose. It's got a bit of tape on one end, and I just stick a bit of sticky tape to my chest. And what I'm looking for is I use this to estimate the length. So I follow the wiring run. I follow the length that I want. And just roughly the distance that it needs to be. So it should be approximately that long. And then stick a little bit of tape on the hose. So the next step is the labeling. I've already prepared the labels for each end on my Dymo label maker. And the size of the labeling depends on whether it's going to have a terminal on each end or a pin into a bit of avionics. A pin gets the 6mm tape, and if I'm using a crimp terminal like something like this, it gets a 9mm tape. I then reel out a little bit of wire, roughly what I think, trying my hardest not to twist it. I align it with the end, and this lets me get a nice length without wasting any wire. Okay. So the next step is to add a terminator onto one end. So in this case it's a number 6 ring terminal for the Honeywell switches that I'm using. Opening up this heat shrink is a real pain. I always put it on with the tail down the wire first, so when you read it, it works from left to right. I then strip the wire the correct amount, making sure I use the correct size, like 22. Get the terminal in the machine, in the crimpers. Looking for the wire to appear just outside the other end. Ouch! Terminal. Pull test. Then this goes up over the top. It's not always easy. And I orientate the label. In this case it's up, so it can be read when it's installed. Then it gets shrunk. The next step is to double check in the wiring diagram exactly where this terminal needs to go. Here you can see I've got the battery switch common ground. It needs to go on stud number 2, terminal number 2 on the bus cross tie switch. So now we install the wire at one end. I find the easiest way with these little tiny switches is to put it through the 2 terminals, and then you can attach it. Making sure when I tighten it that I hold the terminal, and I just bend it up into the correct, so it sits really nicely. So you can see I've got a bunch of temporary ties here to hold wires in place. These are really good. These are cable ties that can be loosened and reused, reusable cable ties. So what I do is I loosen off the places where I think it's going to run, and I progressively tighten them as I go. So now it's just a case of running the wire neatly, trying to keep everything in a neat way. As an example, when I come to an Adel clamp like this, I'm trying always to keep the wires parallel. I never want the wires to cross over each other, make a mess. So when I get it run a little bit like this, I'll tighten it, being careful to not crimp a loop. And then I can use these temporary cable ties to tighten the wires in each location to get a nice run, a run that sits nicely. To run the wire, this is my main sort of trunk across the aeroplane. All the wires from the tail and the back of the aeroplane come up here, and this is sort of the main highway. So I've got a couple of temporary cable ties in here that I'm using. And what my aim is here, I'm looking at ultimately where the wire needs to run, and then deciding where it needs to run through each Adel clamp so it looks neat and tidy. And importantly, everything remains parallel. And then up here, see there's a loop formed in the wire. Come down this way. There's a loop formed in the wire. When I get this, I don't want this to crimp, to cause a kink. So I just twist it out and then pull it tight like this. And then once again, progressively tightening all these temporary ties as I go. So now the wire's been pretty much roughed into where it needs to go. I use my wiring diagram to figure out which tab this is going to, which it's going up to this one here. Then it gets cut to length. Once cut to length, you make sure that I put the label on. And we strip and terminate the wire. Finally, the label gets put in place and shrunk. And I use the wiring diagram to make sure that I'm putting it into the correct location, which was number 3. And that's it. These wires will all get bundled and tied up when this section is complete. Finally, I come back to my wiring diagram and I use a little P to make which stands for pinned. So I've pinned the ring terminal here on the switch. When I go to the forest of tabs, I have pinned the fast on this end. So this wire is totally correct. I come back down to my drawing here. This is my master list of wires that gets marked as pinned. Job done.